Fire Emblem Fates has a lot of different versions and localizations. Many will point to the three paths being separate games, and some will point to the expensive Special Edition, which has all three paths. But today, I want to talk about a version of Fire Emblem Fates that contains both the main two paths in the same box, and is the first game in the series released in a region, much like how Fire Emblem 7, The Blazing Sword, was for the West. Hello everyone, LunarDave here, and today I want to talk about the Korean version of Fire Emblem Fates, the version you probably never played. To begin, it's important to know that Korea had a cultural trade ban with Japanese products up till 1998. Because of this, many titles never officially made it to Korea, such as the first generation of Pokemon games. This led Korean-based companies to license and essentially create a loophole to sell products from Japan. In this case, for Nintendo products, you will find companies like Hyundai introducing the American NES and Game Boy lineup as the Comboy and Mini Comboy systems respectively. And even after the trade ban, you wouldn't see that many Nintendo titles officially coming through. So it wasn't really until around July 2006 and onwards with the Wii and DS generation when Nintendo created the Nintendo of Korea division, where they began to push more and more releases officially. With the Wii U never being sold in Korea, and with Nintendo speeding up their releases to more and more regions during the 3DS and finally the Switch era, it all culminated in the Fire Emblem series to finally reach South Korea and debut with Fire Emblem Fates, being the final region to receive the game on September 8th, 2016. So, with that in mind, what makes this version different from the others? The first most notable difference is the box art, showing both Birthright and Conquest, or, as it's titled in Korean, 백야 왕국 and 암야 왕국, which essentially just means White and Dark Night Kingdom. Much like the Japanese version of Fire Emblem If, with Fates also being called If in this release. The art split is also different from the Special Edition, where that one has the full Birthright and Conquest art in the front and back. Speaking of the back, it also shows a split between the two paths you have available, which is kinda like the back cover box for the Special Edition. Opening the box reveals the cartridge, which continues this trend of having a diagonal split, matching the Special Edition cartridge, along with having a postcard related to Kakao Story. For context, Kakao Story is sort of like the WhatsApp meets Instagram stories for South Korea. So, from my understanding, the contents in the card is used as a way to link your Nintendo Network ID account to find the friends you have in your account on Kakao Story. Neat! But, of course, what is the actual cost of this version? The retail price for this game in the Korean currency was 69,000 won, which in USD would be about $51.02 at the time of recording this video. Back when the game was released, it was worth $62.80. That is roughly about the price of one route and buying another digitally. So you're not saving any money by importing this game compared to if you got the game in the USA at the release date. Now with the contents inside of the game, the first question that might come up would be, what version of Fates did the Korean version use to translate? Well, it's kind of an amalgamation of all of them actually. Yes, they did remove features like the other international releases, such as the face petting minigame along with the hot springs camera. The game also uses English audio and names for the characters, which means this is basically using the international releases, right? Well, about that, while yes, it shares many cut features from the international releases, it seems that the game uses mostly the Japanese text to translate from. And some characters keep their original Japanese name as well, most notably Corrin keeping her Japanese name Kamui, which is unlike any other international release. The most likely reason as to why Kamui seems to be the exception is actually the opposite. The other names that use the localized names are the exception. This is because the game, as mentioned earlier, uses the English audio. And as the English audio uses the localized names, it makes sense for them to have to change the dialogue and names to the localized versions. And since Kamui's name isn't mentioned or spoken about in the game normally, it makes sense why they're singled out. But then, why even use the English audio in the first place? I actually don't know. Maybe it's because it was easier, as the international release already had the remove features and used the English audio? And with all later releases of Fire Emblem in Korea, such as Shadows of Valentia and onwards using the Japanese audio, it just kinda goes to show how weird of a choice it was to use the English audio, especially in a market that tended to not like non-original dubs. But with that aside, what's the quality of the translation? While I am a Korean, and I can speak and read basic Korean, I am far too inexperienced with the language to tell you whether or not it's a good translation or not. But from my own personal experience playing the early sections of the game, I found it to be a bit strange. Many of the classes had knight in the name, as well as using a lot of Konglish, at least for the Norian classes. Konglish basically is the style of English words used by Koreans, which is common in South Korea. So you'd get classes named Amo Knight and Social Knight, the latter meaning social knight. That's cavalier! For the Hoshiden classes, it seems like many used the traditional Korean Hanja translations. And to be honest, on stream when I played it, I had a great time trying to figure out what the classes even were. Then later on I figured out that all I had to do was find this Reddit page that listed all the classes and translations. There were a few other awkward moments for me while reading, like the transfer option for pair-up being, as I understand it, to be basically person exchange. Personally, I've always found Korean audio, text, and dialogue to sound oddly stiff and too formal compared to what I'm used to hearing in Korean original games. But again, keep in mind, I'm just super inexperienced with this language, so other Koreans more experienced with Hangul can feel free to roast my inexperience. However, there was one thing I found immediately noticeable when I began playing the game on stream. It used Japanese audio. That can't be right. Every source I read up about it, till I got the game through means, said they used the English audio. Are they all wrong? No, it couldn't be. I mean, Leon was spoken in the audio, but in the text it clearly says Leo in Korean. So what is it? I then began to comb through Korean websites and the Nintendo of Korea's YouTube channels' videos, finding streams of people playing the game on emulators having the exact same situation. With any official trailers indeed using the English audio. And seemingly nobody has been talking about it. It really wasn't until hours and hours later that I managed to stumble across a super niche Korean webpage with mobile Citrus screenshots that actually had English audio. So yes, the most readily accessible version of the Korean localized version of Fates that you will find without owning it physically or through a 3DS that already has it digitally is not actually the original game, and is what appears to be a patched version of the game made by someone? Perhaps one day we can find out who this could be, but for now this just remains a mystery that I don't think I can solve. So, how has Fire Emblem in Korea been since the release of Fates? Well, it's certainly performed well enough for Nintendo of Korea to continue with Shadows of Valentia, and with pretty much any release since being after Nintendo pushed for no region locking on the Switch, meaning most games nowadays and onward from Nintendo will just have the Korean text defaulting to Japanese audio. And clearly, Fire Emblem in Korea is popular enough to receive fan translations for the older games in the series, which is really cool to see. You know, as someone who started the Fire Emblem series out with Fates and continues to regularly play it every year since 2017, it just feels oddly nice that it was also the first game from where I was from. But with that said, that is all for today's video. If you like what you saw and want to see more FE content in the future, be sure to hit that like, subscribe, and bell icon. And hey, if English or Japanese isn't your native language, I'd love to hear your own experience with Fire Emblem's localized versions in your own native language if they have any interesting stories like this in the comments down below. But regardless, again, that'll be all for today, and I guess I'll be seeing you guys sometime soon. Bye, Pia!